right, and welcome back. I'm Jackie Giunta with the Irregular Warfare Initiative. We are now in week 6 of the conflict in the 6th edition of the series. And this series is produced in collaboration with IWI's Economic and Legal Warfare Group. Today, we're going to be focusing on emerging technologies, private innovation, and industrial capacity, and how those elements are shaping the trajectory of this fight. So today, I'm joined by Gianni Koskinas, Hamlet Yousef, and Ed Bogan. I'm going to have each of you just give a quick introduction, and then we can jump right into it. So, Gianni, let's start with you.
Sure. Gianni Koskinas, about 20 years plus in special operations in the military, and then I got out and started a company after a while, focusing on understanding the environments in some goofy places like Afghanistan, Iraq, the Levant, and other parts of the world, and also building partner capacity with host nations and from east to west, north and south around the globe.
All right, Hamlet.
Great. Hamlet Yousef, one of the founders and managing partners at Iron Gates Capital Advisors. We're an early stage VC fund that invests in tech that goes into national security and defense. So very keenly focused on this area, but also honored to be involved with IWI as part of their economic legal warfare division. So the concept of regular warfare is something that's very keen to me. Prior to doing the fund, I spent had a career in the federal government working in the national security space. So I had a front row seat seeing how we deploy and go after assets, particularly in global war and terror. So looking forward to getting this conversation here.
Perfect. And over to you, Ed.
Thanks for having me. Ed Bogan, spent 24 years with CIA's Directorate of Operations. I framed the first half of my career as very much involved in the global war on terror, with a particular focus on South Asia. And the second half of my career is largely framed by Ukraine's battle with Russia. And since I left 2 years ago, I founded a research institute called the Institute for the Study of States of Exception, which looks at weaponization of emergency powers around the globe. And I've got a range of other activities going on with several defense technology companies.
All right, great. So let's jump right into it. There's been a lot to focus on. There's a lot of significant headlines over the past week. But for this week, let's start by stepping back, looking at what's actually shaping the trajectory of this conflict. As we look ahead, I'm going to feel this to the group. I'd like to get the take of each of you on where you see the most meaningful indicators of where there may be points of escalation and how much of that is being driven by technology and private sector innovation. So Hamlet, I think it's fair to start with you. This is your AO, so let's jump in.
Yeah, I think we're in kind of the prep conversation. We're talking about how autonomous systems are starting to democratize warfare and conflict. The cost of a drone back when Gianni and Ed were bouncing around the Middle East was, the Reaper was what, a couple $1 million for a quote unquote Group 3 drone. Now you're able to get that same exact kind of capability and effect on target for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, especially when you start getting into the one-way drones the Iranians are building. So it's changing the landscape demonstrably. To be able to win a conflict, you have to have air superiority and naval superiority. That requires fielding an Air Force and a Navy. Neither one of those is cheap. It takes billions and trillions of dollars to manufacture and produce and sustain that kind of infrastructure. So only major nation states had that capability. But with autonomous warfare and drones that go and fly, that float, that sink and are submersible, you're starting to see nation states have the same capability as a traditional tier 1 country for a fraction of the cost. So it really is leveling that battlefield.
Yeah, Ed, what are your thoughts, just based on what you're seeing, especially in particular to Ukraine, but then more broadly and how it ties into this conflict?
Yeah, I echo everything that Hamlet just said. I think the leveling of the playing field is highly concerning, and it's not that that Iran is going to be able to outright win a war with us in any way, shape, or form. But what the damage they can do is quite substantial, and for low cost, and the ability to remain a significant irritant and achieve some of their own goals is going to be incredibly difficult to disrupt. You look at the some of the innovations that are taking place in Ukraine are happening so fast, and it's on both sides of that war. And those innovations are absolutely translating to this battle space rapidly. And as Hamlet noted, there's other sort of proxy partners of Iran, and these capabilities are going to proliferate. Already are proliferating rapidly, and making this in a far more complex battle space.
Yeah, and Gianni, what are your thoughts here?
It's incredible what's happening, because even last week, Hamlet made the distinction of we're going into Cold War 2.0. And I'll frame my comments basically with that theme in mind. Whatever we're facing right now, if you take it and multiply it into a global sort of scale of a Cold War 2.0, it isn't going to be fought, as Hamlet said, with the weapons of Cold War 1. And in fact, we're seeing that drones and ballistic missiles are something that are keeping at bay far larger, far more capable capabilities. And I think that there are a lot of lessons being learned around the world. The biggest one, I would say, is that let's take, for example, a couple of years ago, Iranian militias or pro-Iranian militias targeted a very remote base near Al-Tanf in Syria, and one drone got through. There's a lot in the after action that can probably go into how and why, but it killed Americans, and it was the first for some time casualties of war for Americans. That was one drone. What we're seeing now is the mass. And the example that, quite frankly, has been going on in Ukraine since 2022, and increasingly happening since 2022, but now we're experiencing ourselves. So I think all sides are taking a lot of lessons learned. For the American side, I'll say we probably have lessons identified rather than lessons learned.
Yeah.
But others are definitely taking a careful notes right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at an inflection point in terms of technology. So that, coupled with the layering of the geoeconomic infrastructure needed to support that, but then also, I mean, the geopolitics that are shaping what conflict is. So something that I think is worth evaluating, especially for this group, is the ability for proxy forces irrelevant to the conflict in Iran to rapidly iterate, for them to be able to integrate ISR and strike capabilities, and then to be able to leverage that against, it's back to the David versus Goliath concept that we talked about last week. So how is this impacting our ability for U.S. forces to conceptualize like what the enemy capability is relevant to proxy forces in the broader Gulf region? Gianni, let's start with you again on that one.
I think that one of the biggest challenges, and there's obviously different definitions to proxy warfare, but I'll put it in this context. I think that what is not covered in the news right now is that the U.S., it could be U.S. and Israel, we don't know, because there are no claims or there's no bombs dropped statistics that are coming out about what's happening in Iraq. But in Iraq, there's a lot of targeting of pro-Iranian militias. And they, on the other side, are targeting a lot of U.S. interests, the bases. But now they've started, for some time now, they've started targeting Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan, and other locations. All of it with rockets and drones that are probably organically made. I don't think that there are a lot of parts that are coming out of Iran right now. If anything, there's probably more material flowing into Iran from Iraq than the other way around. So proxies have a lot of influence in this. They're quite frankly something that is being utilized brilliantly. And I mean that not in a positive way. It's a Dr. Evil brilliant way from Iran. But I'm not sure if we're really paying that much attention. Playing whack-a-mole with Iraqi militias is not necessarily the answer. And I'll tell you what, they also have counters. For example, they took and they kidnapped an American journalist in Baghdad last week, and they're, word on the street is that they're keeping her in a place in Babylon, in Jafar al-Sakhr, that basically is where a lot of people believe, because you're not able to go in there, the popular mobilization forces, and in particular Kataib Hezbollah and some of the more virulent ones, are actually building their drones, and and these are their secret bases. So, the idea of human shields is not beneath them, and so they're always adapting, and the world of asymmetric warfare. And I'll pause after this. I think Hamlet and Ed would agree. It's all about moves, counter moves, counter moves, and it's constantly adjusting. And that kind of OODA loop is something that is really unique. And it is not handled by conventional warfare specialists very well. And that has not treated us very well in our previous conflicts.
Yeah, Hamlet, if I'm interested in your take, especially you brought up a great point, Gianni, with the OODA loop there. I mean, that's a significant element of this as well. So Hamlet, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to tee this up perfectly for Ed, but we saw this coming years ago when we first set up our fund. We wanted to invest in tech that we thought was going to basically change the battlefield completely. Nobody really understood our thesis until the Ukraine war kicked off, and people then really began to understand what asymmetric warfare looked like and the role that private tech and private innovation would look like. Our focus is early stage VC investing. That's the area we own and we specialize in. What we saw since 2022 is the VC community generally shunned defense. They didn't want to have anything to do with America, not America. They didn't want to have anything to do with basically doing military tech. That changed. So you've seen millions and millions of dollars pour into the ecosystem, and as a result, Silicon Valley has done what Silicon Valley does really good, which is create these very, very complex, expensive, exquisite solutions without necessarily a sound manufacturing scaling plan immediately behind it. And the minute some of that tech arrived in Ukraine, it was literally dead on arrival. And you saw drone companies popping up left and right in Ukraine that were capitalized and formed out of necessity by Ukrainians, that were creating solutions at the fraction of the cost of these $1 million solutions were coming in. So that landscape in the last year has been demonstrably changed, where no longer is it sexy to go out there and create a $1 million drone. What you want to be able to do is create inexpensive drones and countermeasures that you can scale and manufacture rapidly, and in many cases be able to scale and manufacture rapidly at the edge, so you can deploy them into the battlefield right away. So even the defense tech ecosystem over the last three years has evolved. Over the last year, I think, is going through this rapid re-innovation cycle. And I think the conflict here in Iran is going to just amplify that significantly.
Yeah, I think if I could make not a clarifying point, but an amplifying point on that is, 2024, early on, the story in Ukraine was electronic warfare on Russia's side was so overwhelming that one-way attacks by the Ukrainians, which had been fairly successful before that, were getting largely defeated. And all they could do, they couldn't even diagnose the why, so to speak, early on, because of the overwhelming saturation of electronic warfare. So the only answer was to increase the volume of arrows you're throwing at the problem instead of trying to figure out how to do things differently. And over time, a multiplicity of solutions were developed with respect to, machine vision, with respect to, something like, the fiber optic spools, things that you wouldn't have thought of. But so many different solutions came up, and they keep changing very quickly, because then the Russians would develop counters to those pretty rapidly. So you have this OODA loop is so tight. I mean, sometimes it's weeks in terms of like the changes that are taking place. And for a company, like, it's moving so much faster than the speed of any business, that it does require what Hamlet said, is having these companies being as close to the edge as possible, which, only a subset of the companies are, willing to make those commitments. I mean, there's certainly an incredible risk to what's happening here. Obviously, it's a necessity, so the people have to step up to this and figure it out. But the rapid iteration that's taking place is mind-boggling. And then you add to that this democratization of the capabilities and this proliferation of the capabilities, and we're just in a strange world where I just don't know that we're really well positioned for this at this moment.
Yeah, the ability to scale is, that is going to make or break many instances of success. And like you said, Hamlet, it's like these incredible solutions, but look at the supply chains. That's really your crippling points in a lot of ways, right? Like it's the supply chain. You can create these drones, you can 3D print anything, but a lot of times it's the electronics, and the best capabilities oftentimes tie back to either right? China might be the cheapest, they're not the best, but they're plentiful. That's going to impact your ability to scale, and the Pentagon's not going to buy your equipment because you're not in these blue supply chains. But what are in these blue supply chains are now competitive, and competing against the U.S. government in some instances as well, right? Like, the U.S. government, their innovation labs, they're starting to build and iterate on their own. So as a private sector company building, that's another challenge to think about too, right? Like if Ukraine has the best electronics, and you're competing against the U.S. government to access that, then that's another challenge as well.
Right.
But Gianni, did you have a comment on that as well? I saw you unmute, and I was curious if you had some.
No, I was literally muting myself just to keep. We have some chickens outside, and I was trying to keep the chickens away. So here's a little moment. I'm at my parents' house. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Deep in thought.
All right. Well, so I think this, at your points, lead nicely here into my next question, and it's relevant to autonomy. So the ability for autonomy to fundamentally change who can generate meaningful combat power. This is like, talk about leveling the playing field, right? Like in some of these new technologies are just incredible, and especially in GPS denied environments, you still have equipment that can make sound decisions and continue to press forward. So that those things are, again, rapidly iterated, and it's tighter and tighter. How is that changing the landscape today? Hamlet, let's start again with you there.
Look, autonomy just as a broad space itself, I think it's disruptive in many facets. One, just from an operator standpoint, the very tip of the edge is no longer risking an operator. In many cases, a drone is doing that frontline penetration. So whether you're going into a warehouse or you're trying to do advanced surveillance into a marina or into a valley, instead of risking 2, 3, 4, 5 operators, in many cases now you're risking a $20,000, $30,000 drone. So the impact on human life, or the savings on human life, I think is tremendous. The other areas where this obviously comes into play is from a demographic standpoint. We have an aging demographic. Everyone's talking about how military recruitments are down. Well, if military recruitments are down, part of that is a function of demography. One of the quickest ways to fill that gap is going to be autonomous systems. A lot of the autonomous systems are going to be able to do some of the high risk things that humans needed to do in the past. So that's going to be actually a perfect complement for the fact that we do have a downward trend recently in recruitment, especially in the special operations community. That's also going to change, I think, the complexions of what a forward deployed secret operative or a unit's going to look like. It's not all going to be hitters and physical fitness and being able to shoot a card out size on from an accuracy standpoint on a gun. It's going to be folks who are hackers and coders and system operators that can help you basically deploy your autonomous system. So the complexion of conflict and warfare is changing at the granular level. You're also starting to see systemic changes to force in general. For example, there's a company coming out of stealth called Magnet Defense, and they're looking to build 48-meter and 64-meter fully autonomous ships at a fraction of the cost of what it would cost us to field a Navy. So how does that apply to the Straits of Hormuz? So imagine a conflict in Iran where instead of having to deploy billion-dollar frigates to try to keep the straits open, you have an escort of inexpensive ships that are 50-plus meters in size, that are fully armed with electronic warfare and counter-drone hardware and capabilities, and they're able to protect a shipping lane for a fraction of the cost without having to risk human life and capital. So everything is changing. So this democratization of autonomy, not only is it going to have an impact at the edge, at the unit level, it's going to have a significant edge when you look at nation states as well. So shipbuilding, China has had a massive lead on the U.S. in terms of shipbuilding for the better part of 2 decades. Our shipbuilding infrastructure is pretty sluggish, to put it kindly. How do you disrupt that? Well, through advanced manufacturing and autonomous systems. And one of the things that Magnet is trying to do is do exactly that, bring autonomy to disrupt shipbuilding. So we're not building ships the way we've done for the last 150 years. You bring innovation to it. You start cranking out ships that are more efficient and more or less expensive than what China is doing. We can't compete with China head to head in anything because they have a bigger balance sheet and they have 4x our population. We've got to be more efficient in terms of how we fight, how we prepare for that. And I think autonomous systems, all the way from the unit level to the platform level, is going to be a key part of that.
Yeah, and if I may, again, just sort of amplify that point, I think that's a hell of a point. And you look at the extraction that just took place; that was just magnificent operationally. But look at what the costs were associated with it, because this, you had first the F-15E that was shot down, that was the catalyst for all of this. But then you have one on rescue, an A-10 was shot down. 2 helicopters were shot up. 3 MQ-9s allegedly were downed as a result of this. 2 C-130s, 3 little birds. It's a lot that comes from the requirement, the absolute necessity of going and getting that human out. But again, you find packages like Hamlet just described. It starts to cut that down, not in every instance, but in some instances, you prevent that sort of domino effect requirement of resources and risk.
I'll throw in a couple of things. I must admit, this is not my target zone, and I'm probably one of those cavemen that believes that humans are more important than hardware. But I think one of the issues here, and I don't think that Ed or Hamlet would disagree with that. I mean, we're all in the business that kind of specializes in certain unique capabilities that you're not going to automate. But there are a lot of businesses out there, whether you're a paralegal or you're in media advertising, that automation and AI is going to just alter everything. It's hard to think that you're not going to have massive change in the defense sector or in the way that we fight. So I yield to all those things that people have mentioned. I hope we get to talk a little bit about the extraction. I think that was a fascinating. I would love to be in the after action report, a room when they're saying, what happened, but the integration of a lot of systems was spectacular. Yeah. The one thing I'll mention about automation is there is this tendency to think that automation is like devoid of human contact or human input. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of us make, particularly in our age group, to think that there is no human in the loop with automation in some sectors and sections of it. So I think that automation can accelerate a lot of things, but there is still going to be a for the foreseeable future in our lifetimes, a lot of human interface. So don't be afraid of certain things, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'll pause here so we can keep the train moving, because I'm probably the lowest IQ when it comes to automation and those issues.
I'll dogpile on that. I'm curious to see how this kind of morphs itself, because Gianni brought up a very important concept, and that is human in the loop. So for those of you guys who aren't close to the problem set, you have a drone, whether it's on the water underneath or flying above or on the ground, and it sees a target. Right now, our rules of engagement is a human in the loop is pulling the trigger or giving the go or no go decision for that drone to strike the target. So using the example of the recent extraction, let's say we have an entire fleet of drones flying overhead to provide cover support for our special operators who are pulling the airmen off the ground. If those drones are fully autonomous and have a human in the loop, so to speak, somebody's making the kill no kill decision of who to fire on, because everything you saw in press reporting, they basically through the air, we had an entire basically cone over the extraction point, schwacking any militia or IRGC or Iranian forces that came close to the extraction point. A human was making that decision. It's pretty apparent that China and Russia are creating their autonomous systems in many cases not to have a human in the loop. So you have a fully autonomous weapon system that's making kill or no kill decisions based on data and based on computer vision, based on programming, based on algorithms. So there's no human in the loop. It's just schwacking and killing people. Well, what happens if it mistakes the IRGC besieged militia member with an AK-47 with a villager walking with a cane or whatever? Just use an extreme example. If we start slowing down and requiring a human in the loop, how do we compete against a country that's fighting without ethics and AI, and they're developing systems that take the human being completely out of the loop? Now, I'm not saying we need to meet the Russians and the Chinese where we're at. I guess what I'm trying to say is that whole concept of ethics in AI, autonomous systems, come into play, because where robots and drones are the hardware of the future of conflict, the bullets is data. It's AI. It's information. So how do we synthesize with it? If we sit there and bitch and moan that the Russians and the Chinese are fighting us in an unfair fight because the human is out of the loop, and we want to take the high road and have a human in the loop, then we very quickly start looking like the British, kind of packing our muskets and complaining that the American irregulars are shooting us in the back and not fighting with conventional warfare tactics. So technology always gets to the battlefield well ahead of regulations and ethics and people thinking through that. And I think as this autonomous warfare concept continues to evolve, I think policy, regulation, and ethics are going to be behind it. And then when I say behind it, not pushing it, but behind it as in trying to catch up to it.
Ed, you were going to say something. I definitely have something to say.
No, go for it. Go for it. Jump on
in. Here's a couple of things. First of all, here's where autonomous, human in the loop versus autonomous. Let's not get too crazy with the cheese whiz on the definitions there, okay? But here's a situation in which, whether or not it happened, the report has not come out yet. The after action on the strike on the school that used to be an IRGC location, and now it was a target that ends up with 175 odd some people killed. What was that? I don't know, because we don't have the details. But was that a human in the loop issue? Was it an automation issue? What was it? I think that eventually, we'll figure out what it was. There's a lot of things that a lot of people are making arguments over, specific to what you said, Hamlet. And again, you're just laying it out. You're not taking, some moral position here about what the Chinese and the Russians are able to do. That is a problem set that we're going to have to figure out within our own parameters. We're not going to go down the path we shouldn't go down the path of fighting like Chinese or Russian autonomous systems with no distinguishing, what's left or right, what's, villager versus just kill them all and let God sort them out, is not the idea. I think that we can certainly improve a lot of things that are being done to accelerate that OODA loop to where it's not a hindrance to us to not target. But these are problem sets that we're going to be wrestling for a long time. And it's not just let's go down the Chinese path. I think we still have to maintain our own mechanisms of morality, and because you can also go the other way. You can also go the way of taking recruitment and say people aren't joining because we're just killing people. It's automated. It's Call of Duty on a laptop, and we're not going to take that path. So there are a lot of dimensions to this. I think that we're going to go off track very quickly when we go down this path, but certainly it's an impact that we have to consider moving forward in irregular warfare and asymmetric fights.
Yeah, the battle space is much bigger than, we don't need to go down this path too much either, because I think I could go down some rabbit holes. But the type of warfare we can conduct on the margins, corrupting adversary data sets, going after critical minerals that they need to support various technology. There's looking at advanced energy capabilities and how do we disrupt adversary energy sources. There's a lot to look at in this battle. We're talking about the most acute aspect of it is like when the rubber hits the road stuff. And those conversations, versions of them have happened since the beginning of time with every advancement, radical advancement in warfare technology. And they have similar contours and they're important, they're crucial. But I agree with Gianni. I think there's going to be a lot of nuance to where that conversation goes.
Maybe the Institute for the Study of States of Exception can, kind of focus. If only somebody was doing something like this.
Shameless plugs. I love them.
It is pretty exceptional.
And so, Gianni, to your point, the human element in the Western world in particular, the struggle with like the human in the loop, human on the loop. This bleeds into a host of different technologies that are all adopting these capabilities. So maybe it's technology, maybe it's more human driven, but I'm curious for the take of each of you on if there's one capability or maybe a shift that are we underestimating right now that in the next several months, maybe a year, that we'll see as being much more meaningful than what we see now. Hamlet, go ahead and start on that one.
I think it falls into two areas. One, I think, is we've got to get better at building things. We've gotten really good at inventing things and creating exquisite solutions, and in some cases, low-cost solutions. But our ability to rapidly scale and manufacture, I think, is grossly lagging. I think, a bit of a knock on our own ecosystem. The early stage venture space is super hot right now, and that's where everyone's paying attention to. But no one's paying attention to where the puck is supposed to be going, which is advanced manufacturing and being able to build at scale. So whether you're going to build giant warships like Magnet at a fraction of the cost, or you're going to build drones, or you're going to build components, or you're a company like Union who's looking to revolutionize ammo manufacturing and wants to build 155 shells for a fraction of the cost and time of what conventional manufacturing has done. Those are areas that capital is going to need to address very quickly. So we've got to get better at building stuff at home and scaling companies. But the big choke point there that I think people aren't fully appreciating is critical minerals, rare earth elements. These are things that if we can't grasp what that supply chain is going to look like, we can't build anything, not just weapon systems, but windmills, solar panels, iPhones, any bit of tech or gear that has made our life more comfortable or made our defense ecosystem more lethal and efficient requires rare earths and critical minerals. And that's an area that the Chinese have been very quietly and aggressively trying to corner and asphyxiate, because they know if they can control that, they can in essence try to starve us out. Specific to rare earths and critical minerals and mining, it's not that America doesn't have access to those deposits. We do. A lot of those are in North America, and a lot of those are in America. But some of our regulations and policies that we are trying to live by, the Chinese don't give a rip about. So they're able to manufacture and process metals and materials at a fraction of the cost from what we can do here in the U.S. Now, am I arguing that we need to go ahead and light the entire ecosystem on a fire and not care about the caustic impacts of processing metals? No. But then going back to what I was saying earlier, this evolution of innovation coming from the private sector isn't just about drones and bullets and guns. It is about how do you process and refine metals and materials at a fraction of the cost, but also take the caustic impact out of the environment so we can actually start doing that stuff here domestically. Because absent that, we're going to have a significant issue if we want to get into a sustained conflict in terms of innovation and tech with the Chinese.
Yeah, Yanni, I'm curious your take as well. Maybe it's more the human side. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to take it a totally different direction. So Ed, if you want to stay on the tech portion of it, maybe you jump in, because my take on this is completely different in terms of where we need to go. So I don't want to be the sandwich here, but maybe Ed, you jump in if that's where you're going.
Well, no, I mean, I think maybe my place is a little bit left field-esque as well, but my thought process is about um, how quickly these capabilities are proliferating globally, with all the flashpoints, the small flashpoints around the planet, just the simmering disputes that will be reignited through some of these capabilities. That's why thinking through this and working through even frameworks for how this should be done is so crucial, because I think this is going to move faster than we expect across the entire planet. It's going to increase instability in the near term across the planet, and humanity is probably not prepared for this, as we usually aren't, and we catch up. So I think that that's the big risk.
Yeah, I think one of the things that will keep on surprising us, so this is a bit of more back to the future kind of concept, is once more, some of us are going to say, man, I wish we had a little bit more time to think about the Iran problem set. If only we understood the Iranian regime a little bit better, or if only we really understood what was happening, or if we could just foment a little bit more dissent amongst them, or things like, starting, how do I get IRGC guys to not show up tomorrow? Things to work tomorrow. How do I get their leadership, the next round of leadership, to start thinking a little bit less revolutionary than the other ones? Like, these are topics that we probably have had a long time to think about, but we're still gonna have a lot more thoughts. Again, I'm not raining on the parade of this administration or the last administration or 10 administrations back, but a lot of administrations have kicked this bucket down the road so far, where we've done just about nothing when it talks, when we've seen this train wreck coming with an enterprise effectively that has the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps is there to protect the revolution. They're not the army; they're just there to protect the revolution, and the Quds Force being the external operations to expand and foment and export the revolution. And all of a sudden, we're still surprised, that this has happened. I mean, the center of gravity right now. Sorry that Ed, I know Ed had to leave. The center of gravity for a lot of things that are happening is the Strait of Hormuz. Who could have seen this coming? Again, so all these things are happening, and we're kind of rediscovering them. And while a lot of the production is going to improve and a lot of the automation is going to improve, because things are just going to have to move faster, and the assembly line kind of concept, revolutionary concept that it is going to come. But what's not going to change is the fact that we're still going to look at this 6 months down the road or 6 years down the road and go, that in the next conflict, oh man, I wish we could have done X, Y, Z. We just don't learn. And what amazes me is that, if you're walking down the hallways at any headquarters, you pick one, it's probably that small office that has, few people, that is the one that's the next conflict. Because we tend to not think about these incredible. Norm Rule, for example, I think we all know Norm, a legend in terms of analysis, and in particular about Iran, said that Iran is one of those unique problem sets, because Iran is one of those odd problem sets that it's both urgent, it's lethal, and and it's strategic. There are not that many places around the planet, the conflicts that are all those three things at once. And he would argue Iran is the only one. And yet, we've been kicking this can down the road for a long time. So I'll hit pause there. But man, you opened up a can. This is literally, I think, at the heart of irregular warfare, is that it's a hard problem set. Yep. And I don't think we're looking at it hard enough, because the big machine, big Army, big Navy, big Air Force could care less about this. Big ships, big airplanes, $100 million airplanes, not $100 airplanes is the way to do it. Big IDIU contracts with $1 billion, not a $3 million, small business kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we think in big terms. We don't think in small. So anyway.
Like you bring up a great point. I know, Jackie, that IWI is looking to launch an entire podcast series around disruptions in tech. This is without a doubt like a multi-faceted, multi-hour discussion. I think it's well warranted. But I think the point that Gianni hit right there is that disruption that's coming from the private sector, from a technological standpoint, is running into an entire army of no-bots within the Pentagon and within the defense procurement ecosystem, which includes some of the primes and some of the commercial entities that are building these moats around defense, because they, to Yanni's point, they want to sell more $100 or $1 billion ships versus a $30 million vessel that can do the same offset power as multiple. And so just that concept of protecting their nest egg is a real issue we have. And like it or not, this administration is to a certain extent waged war on the traditional conventional procurement process. Now, in that process, I hope we don't throw out a lot of babies with the bathwater, but that culling of old way of thinking has to happen. And I mean, I think I don't want to speak for Ed here, but the reason the Ukrainian OODA loop, their ability to observe, orient, decide, and act is inside 2.5 weeks, is because they're getting shot at. And if they don't fix their problems, they're dead. Our OODA loop process within the Defense Department is 5+ years. You can't win a conflict if it's taking you that long to adjust, fire, adopt, and push innovation into the landscape. If this innovation cycle that we're in succeeds, and as it should, you are going to see the destruction of certain primes. Not saying Lockheed and Raytheon are going out of business, but if they don't adopt, some of the conventional roadblocks in the way are going to go out of business, as they should, because that's kind of what creative capitalism is all about, is you have that destruction of old way of thinking. And if we don't adopt that, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble, because the Iranians aren't dealing with that. And I don't think the Chinese are either. I don't think the Russians are either. So if we sit here and kind of navel gaze and go through innovation theater, but don't really actually build and scale and adopt and manufacture at speed here in the U.S., then we're going to be in a lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that private sector is leading in innovation in a lot of ways. In the government demand signals, like sitting and waiting for the requirements to get published, and then to have to iterate on that for 5 to 7 years. Yeah. I mean, it's not feasible. We're going to be not only left behind, but way far gone. So that's and I do give credit to this administration that they've done a great job of opening these commercially sourced solutions that they're going to be trying to leverage the dual use, or maybe it's multi-use concepts of how can we spin this into more of a defense or national security lens. Yeah. So that, I mean, I am happy to see that that's shifting to some extent, but I mean, maybe some more tangible shifts here in the near term will be are much needed. Yeah. So to Ed's point as well, we're going to probably see on a greater scale more of these what we can say are smaller or more these macro micro type conflicts starting to bubble up because of the disbursement and of technology capability, right? So we're going to see small, and then the ability to iterate there as well, right? They're going to have more reps, they're going to advance. How does this impact the leverage for diplomacy in resolving these problems, right? If everybody's got new toys, at least for a for the near term, I think that we're going to see maybe some degree of drop off here, right? Like, do we see a surge in conflict, or I don't know. It's an interesting one from kind of like that FUOPs type mindset, right? So, Hamlet, what do you think?
Look, I think you're going to see significant escalation in conflict, and I think tech is going to be the key driver of this. I've said this, and I've written about this in the past. To me, if you look back at history, from the late 1800s to the mid 20th century, we went from horse and buggy to oil power. We went from horse and buggy and oil powered lamp to modern cities, electricity, the nuclear age, flying rockets, space exploration. We went through 2 world wars, a Cold War, an economic collapse, a pandemic in the early part of the 20th century. You have the fall of the British Empire. You have the balkanization of the Middle East. You have the balkanization of Eastern Europe. You have the rise of America as a superpower. And you have the formation and fall of the Soviet Union. That was all within about 60 years. The driver of that disruption was technology. Technology massively disrupted geopolitical fault lines across the world. And in 60 years, the world completely looked different. We're going through that same kind of evolution right now with technology at the forefront. Not in 60 years. We're going to go through that compression of evolution and change in probably 10. So the impact that's going to have on fault lines, geopolitical alliances is going to be massive. I don't think people fully understand and realize what's about to come. So for investors, allocators, for decision makers and policymakers, understanding what is to come and understanding how those tectonic shifts in technology are going to amplify and in some case create fissure points that we're not seeing on a geopolitical scale, I think is going to be massive. So it's going to have significant impact in terms of diplomacy and statecraft, and then for allocators who are investing in a global marketplace, being able to stay ahead of that information curve and see early warning indicators of what is happening and how to protect or allocate capital is going to be, I think, a massive game changer. I don't think people fully understand and realize what this fully entails. I mean, you have the emergence of a potential Americas as a giant unified economic bloc. If the Iranian regime truly does fall, and the Abraham Accords get their meat hooks into the Iranian population, now you have the potential of an entire formation of a new economic bloc in the Middle East that's based on natural gas and oil, but has a young demographic that's looking to build a new future, and that could completely erase the Sykes-Picot fault lines that were created at the end of the First World War. So I don't think people really understand the amount of tectonic shifts that are about to happen. And I think the driver of that is going to be technology.
I think there is, once again, Hamlet gives a lot
There's a lot of softballs
up front.
buddy.
No, a lot up front, and then he drops a softball in the end that I want to like kind of glam into. But let me zoom out for a second. I think your early comment and Jackie's very insightful question is whether or not this what's happening with the acceleration of a lot of things is going to increase conflicts. Okay. I agree with you, Hamlet. I think that we're looking at an escalation in terms of the frequency of conflicts. But I think that one of the factors that is going to actually basically push us to more damage during these conflicts is a hidden little trap that technology somehow is going to make us smarter about things. And I think that the average bear out there with access to a laptop and an internet connection is all of a sudden a doctor, all of a sudden a lawyer, all of a sudden a military genius. And so everybody comments, especially in the time of influencers, an influencer is going to come in who's a comedian or an actor or, off the street, but they have 6 million followers or 20 million followers, and they're going to come up with a thought, and all of a sudden somehow that thing, kind of mutates into a concept of, maybe we should think about this, because the demand from the crowd is that they would like to see this, and it's almost like we're going into a futuristic conflict in which people vote on how we're going to go, or decisions are made based on, looking at some kind of gadget. I don't want to get sued, so I won't mention some of these things, but these are just absolute, quicksand traps, as far as I'm concerned, for particularly countries. But countries have like a little bit of reservation to go down that path. The commercial sector, I think, has a lot of problems, because they're going to go in, and Jimmy showed up from the Easter Day weekend, and they said, I researched this deeply. 60 seconds on a search, and Claude told me this and this, and and all of a sudden everybody's a specialist. And I think that both countries and companies better start looking for those specialists well in advance. You mentioned, Jackie, diplomacy. You think because somebody is good at some kind of deal making here, and I'm not trying to make this about Iran, but Iran is very different in their diplomacy than Ecuador, or IBM, or SpaceX. It's not the same thing dealing with a company that's going to be, that you do your research and you're like, these people are very indirect in how they're going to talk to you. They're not going to talk to you direct. I mean, Americans, we want, okay, here's the 1, 2, 3. Dude, pack a lunch. It's going to take a while, okay? And we get frustrated because of the fact that they're indirect, they're slow. The exact antithesis of American approach to anything. They give very little. When you're willing to give a lot, sanctions relief and everything else, and they're like, well, we'll go down to 3.5%. Like enrichment. You're like, dude, we just gave you everything. Well, we're not going to give you the Strait of Hormuz. So we get frustrated. We get everything that we're talking about comes down to circling back to, you don't understand the environment. You think that you can actually, quick silver bullet your way to the answer. It's like, imagine if the only thing that we did to create professionals was to use Cliff Notes. You never read the book, you never studied it, you never went master's, PhD, go to Harvard for X or go to Yale for Y. No, just take the Cliff Notes and get your, fast speed. And unfortunately in today's society, and I'm not one of those guys, but I don't play games online. Okay. But a long time ago, I asked somebody who was training young recruits, and what they told me, and this is even 20 years ago, they told me, listen, we're dealing with a generation that they show up and they've never had to struggle to achieve something. They got online, they started playing a game, a buddy of theirs gave them the code, so they never even died when they were playing Call of Duty. They got the advanced code to get to the next level. So they never understood the failure that you have to go through in order to grow. So we're dealing with a lot of stuff right now that technology can help, but they're sure as shit not going to fix it all. And we better get to studying the problem set rather than thinking that we're going to get the quick answer to the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I know it's an important point, and I think it's, one of these, it almost feels like the get off my lawn mentality, right? Like it's like, these, it's an antiquated way of thinking, but it's the value, like you said, Gianni, and being able to have that point of failure and to understand how to adjust. I mean, that's so critical, and not just in the diplomacy aspect, but in the conflict. I mean, just all elements of life, right? So it's interesting. It ties nicely into, a human capital conversation that we can have another time. But I think, we're coming up on time. There's a lot where really, talk about inflection points. We're at a very critical time right now in this conflict. I think I'd like to hand it over to you guys to just give some closing thoughts on where we are this week, and we pick it up next week, where we might be.
Well,
Hamlet, go.
We're at D-Day, I think, right? Today's supposed to be the day that Trump gave the ultimatum to the Iranians. You mentioned earlier, this is our sixth in a 6-part series, because I think when the war kicked off, the timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. So I guess we can stop this because of the war. No, I'm kidding. I think this is going to continue, this conflict in one way, shape, or form. I do think escalation is coming. I think at the heart of what's happening with Iran right now is going to be innovation and technology, but there's so many different offshoots of this in terms of what we can talk about. So again, very appreciative of IWI for creating this platform. I really love these conversations. I think there's a lot for us to continue to unpack. I don't see this ending anytime soon. I think the conventional piece might end soon, hopefully, inshallah. But I think the overall irregular conflict with the regime is just beginning. If you just look at the numbers, there's 90 million plus people inside Iran. If you believe 15%, 10% truly believe in the ideology, and half of them, or 60%, are female, so you have 40% military-aged fighting males, you're still looking at a multi-million person resistance force inside Iran that's going to basically fight to the bitter end. So even though they're outnumbered 10-1, this isn't a conflict that's going to end, I don't think, anytime in the near future.
A lot of things reflect back to culture and strategy based on a clear understanding of a lot of things. Hamlet just mentioned the age and the diversity of the population and how many of them are out there, and yet the guys with the guns are very few, and they can still control the country. I mean, even if you think about it, forget those that are listening to the show that have never been to Iran. Think about it. It takes 600 to 700 police officers to control a multi-million-dollar or a multi-million person city, because the city actually follows the rules. And Iran has learned over 50 years, roughly, how to live within a society that is very specific. It's not a democracy. It's not, driven by particular the demos, the populace actually ruling everything. It's a very small group, and it's the protection of the revolution. So now this small group is going to have tons of problems once the last shot is, because now their problem set is far more aggravated than it was prior to 1 March. I mean, the economy is in worse shape. The infrastructure is in worse shape. The austerity is probably going to be in far worse shape. So a lot of things can still happen afterwards, and we need to be thinking about the day after. I think the escalation is coming. You're absolutely right, Hamlet. I think, quite frankly, some people are looking at the fact that the globe is looking at the fact that even after the last day of the conflict, if tomorrow the Strait of Hormuz is open, which again, I foot stomp, this is literally the center of gravity that we should have been thinking about all the time, and it is it. It isn't the nukes. It isn't the ballistic missiles. It isn't even the Navy or anything else. Those are surrounding elements. The Strait of Hormuz was the key consideration all along. Even if it stops tomorrow, we have, 45 days, 30 to 45 days for a ship that's in the Gulf right now to land somewhere, to dock somewhere where they're out, taking out their cargo. So this issue is going to keep on getting worse for some time after the last day that this thing is a problem. And the world hasn't had oil scarcity issues for some time, roughly 20 years. They've not had LNG issues like this for I think never really. And when Iran fires that Shahed drone and destroys an LNG plant, that isn't being replaced in the next 5 years. So there's a lot of issues that we're going to have to deal with for a long time. But, again, I'll finish by saying this. There's been probably about 10 administrations, and I'm sorry if it's 8, that have kicked the can down the road. And right now, whether you like it or not, we're doing something about it. We have to get it right. We cannot afford to create a situation in which Iran gets the sanctions relief and everything they wanted for as little as they want to give. So subject to any other questions, I would say we probably have plenty to talk about in episode 7 next week.
Yeah, I agree. I know. So it's geoeconomic ripple effects in the near term, but then, I mean, really in the long term. And then in terms of both near and afar, right? Everything is tied together. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. And on behalf of Regular Warfare Initiative, we look forward to another discussion next week. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.